In a day and age where pragmatism, utilitarianism, and every other ism that exists under the sun in order to excuse human deceitfulness, Christians have unfortunately adopted this over and above what the Bible has to say about Christian allegiance to truth and courage, two things that are intimately tied in with one another. How is it that Christians called to live like the salt and the light of the world have adopted the worldly thought process of disguising, that's a term that some will use, repressing, for those that are a bit more honest, the truth that we are supposed to live out so that the world can see that Christ lives in us, and they are supposed to come to Christ so that they may have life eternal. Once again, how is it possible that Christians have adopted and have whitewashed the repression of truth under utilitarianism when the biblical call, the Christian ethical call, is for us to be courageous and truthful all the time? That's the topic for this evening's live stream on Irrespective. Welcome each and every one of you to this new live stream episode. I'm hoping that you're enjoying the new digs, which by new digs, all it means is that I have a black background to focus the image a bit more and on what I have to say. Previously, I had a white background, so as you can imagine, this is a rather big deviation from what we had previously featured on the most recent episodes, the most recent live streams of Irrespective, and I hope that you're enjoying it. We spared no expense, by the way. Welcome each and every one of you to this new live stream episode. For those of you that might be joining us for the first time, my name is Gio, and what this podcast, what this live stream series exists for, is for the edification of the saints, more particularly to broach the subjects that Christians are unwilling to speak on, even though the Bible calls us to speak on those things and to live accordingly, according to what Jesus calls us to live. Irrespective exists so that irrespective of what men's opinions are, whatever the current culture, zeitgeist, whatever the spirit of the age might dictate, we think and act, irrespective of what the world thinks and act, we think and act according to how Christ wants us to live. And of course, many of the commentaries here are going to run afoul of what popular mainstream Christianity teaches, because in a sense, mainstream Christianity actually doesn't follow what the scriptures teach, what Christ teaches. It follows a secularized or a secularization of Christianity, something that is more acceptable to sinners. It's a way to capitulate and to compromise to the current culture. But that's not what the Bible teaches. That's not what Christian ethics dictate. Christian ethics dictate to give our bodies as a living sacrifice, a logical, a reasonable service unto God, and to have our minds renewed and to not be submitted to whatever the cultural zeitgeist is. That is the very reason for our existence. That is the breach that we seek to go through, and that is the void that we are speaking on here, or speaking into here on Irrespective. So if you're joining us for the first time, welcome, welcome, welcome. If you have not done so yet, I would please encourage you to subscribe, whether you're watching this on YouTube, whether you're watching this on X or on Rumble. If you haven't done so yet, subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell to be alerted as to when we go live next, which is consistently every Wednesday at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and on Sundays at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Don't forget to smash that thumbs up button. It's an algorithms game. If you enjoy what we have to offer here, then help us to spread the word by doing so. And last but not least, also share the links to these episodes with your friends, family members, co-workers, what have you, to help others know about the existence of Irrespective. I'd also encourage the audience to interact with me by placing your comments, your questions in the chat. Again, whether you're watching this on X, YouTube, or Rumble, it doesn't matter. I have access to all of them. I see all of the chats. Place your comments, your questions in the chat. I would also like to remind the audience that we need to keep the lights on here. And again, if you enjoy what we do here and are edified, consider donating. It helps us to continue to keep the lights on here. There's a QR code that is available for you, as you can see, that just appeared on the screen. Scan that with your phone. Conversely, there's a link available for you in the description box beneath the video player. And last but not least, don't forget to follow us on the socials. On X, our username is @Irrespective77. And on TikTok, excuse me, thousand pardons, you can find us under the username The Irrespective. Okay. Couple of things here that I'd like to make mention of because, and this has been a long time coming. This has been something that Christians have necessarily practiced in Western culture for some time now because we've allowed the secular culture to inculcate into us something that the Bible, Christian ethics don't teach, which is acquiescence to the secular pressures to keep quiet about our faith under the guise of keeping the peace in a multicultural society. But here is the essential problem with that premise. Under the guise of Christian charity, they have actually infiltrated. What I mean by those, or they, are the people who have advanced this idea. You may hear in churches nowadays the phrase, if you want to show them what Christianity is, show them with love. Speak it with love. Those are buzzwords and buzz phrases, which in essence repeats the secular mantra to Christians. There's no need for you to live your Christianity out loud. There's no way to be vivid with the faith because otherwise you're going to interrupt this false and frankly flaccid idea of unity that we are seeking to impose on you in some way, shape, or form. And that has led Christians to practically stay silent about the faith that they embrace, about the faith once and for all given to the saints. Now, it's curious because for the very same group of people whom talk about Christ-centeredness and being like Jesus, the one thing that seemingly escapes the messaging is how Christ lived loudly. And I know it's going to sound comical, but I hope the audience understands the spirit with which I'm saying this. Christ lived loudly as a Christian. And I know some of you, again, will take issue with my verbiage here. You'll say, but Jesus is the reason that Christians are Christians. How could he be a Christian? Well, the Bible calls us to live according to the measure of the perfect man, which is Christ. And think about it. He would have to give us an example. He would have to set the prime example as to how we are to live. So technically speaking, in a sense, Jesus is the first Christian, as it were. I know it's not really a popular way to present it, but I hope it's a vivid illustration to demonstrate to you how neutered the image of Christ is in many churches, and intentionally so. I mean, one example that stands out is when Jesus cleanses the temple, when he makes a whip and he starts driving out the money changers. Jesus became violent. When you think about it, it's that sort of thing that we read upon and we silently contemplate. Why would the Prince of Peace become violent all of a sudden when he saw the insult to the Father, to the divinity, to God, as they were making merchandise in the temple, the money changers and things of that nature? But that's just one example. It's to prove that we see a zealous nature in Christ that is lacking in Western Christianity today, to live in a particular way, to live in a Christian manner and loudly. And one way this has been manifested ultimately, I would dare say, is in the refusal for Christians to correct what is incorrect, to loudly declaim the truth, even though it might not be popular, even though it won't win you any style points, even though people will necessarily frown upon you for being so-called disagreeable. But if you think about it, the religion of niceness, if we can call it that, is what is pervading churches today. This is why we see a wide gulf between the way that Jesus lives, the way that he ministers, and the way that modern Christians live. There seems to be a wide gulf that separates the two. If you were to compare and contrast the way that modern Christians are told to live and do live compared to the way that Jesus ministered, it's a pretty stark difference. One of the reasons being, as I mentioned before, Christians have allowed themselves to be discouraged to the point where they no longer live according to truth. They live according to human opinion. Whatever said person, organization, the person you work for, or the organization you work for dictates, that is what ultimately comes first and foremost. Our money interests, our economic interests more than anything else. I mean, that's standard American culture, standard 21st American culture. Make sure you serve the dollar more than anything else, right? But curiously enough, all of that has come at the expense of living truthfully and living courageously, which again, as I said at the beginning of this edition, they live hand in hand. Why? Well, if you were to visit with me, and I hope you do so, Joshua chapter number 1, you'll find a couple of verses here, which when God is exhorting Joshua to lead his people, it's a very interesting exhortation. Joshua chapter number 1, and I'll start reading from, let's say, verse 5. No one will stand before you all the days of your life, just as I was with Moses, so will I be with you. I will not fail you. I will not forsake you. So you have the godly promise to be alongside you. But notice that God is promising to keep up his end of the bargain. But Joshua has to also keep up his end of the bargain. Next, God commands him, be strong and courageous. Notice that he's giving him two commands here: strong, filled with strength, and courage. For you will give the people this land as an inheritance that I swore to their ancestors to give them. Only be strong and very courageous. There is again. Why would God impress this upon the Israeli leader? Think about it. When you're leading a people, when you're leading a nation, you're in essence leading a group that inherently carries with it fallen nature and all of the setbacks that brings with it, alongside peer pressure, pressures that the system and the people that participate in that system will put upon you, et cetera, et cetera. All of that is included in this. And God tells Joshua twice, be strong and very courageous, to observe diligently the whole law that Moses, my servant, commanded you. Do not turn aside from it, to the right, to the left, so that you may succeed wherever you go. A scroll of this law will not depart from your mouth. You will meditate on it night and day, that you may observe it diligently, all that is written in it. For you will succeed in your ways and prosper. Did I not command you? Once again, be strong and courageous. Do not fear or be dismayed, for Yahweh your God is with you wherever you go. So we find a commandment here to Joshua, and thrice God tells him, be strong and courageous. So the commandment is there. The exhortation is there. By the way, the very same God that promises Joshua this, he promises the same thing to us, that he will not leave us and he will not forsake us. Jesus repeats this in the Gospels to the disciples and therefore to us, his disciples. But Christians are not living this way. Why? Because of secular pressures. Allow me to give you a couple of examples here which prove the aforesaid in a sense. I know that what I'm going to quote from here is not necessarily a picture-perfect idea, a picture-perfect illustration of what I'm trying to convey here to the audience, but it more or less gives the impression of what I'm trying to get through here. I was reading on ZeroHedge.com that the MLB now is scolding players who wrote Bible verses on Pride Night uniforms. We're back to this again. Some people thought that we were dispensing with the religion of wokeness, but it's here to stay, as I have warned before. Major League Baseball on Monday issued a warning to 3 players who represent the gayest city in America, but who dared to write references to a biblical passage on their Pride Night uniforms. The 3 San Francisco Giants teamed up for the subtle gesture at Friday night's home game, which they lost 5-1 to the visiting Cubs. The writing on the cap violates our rules, and consistent with normal practice, we have warned the players about future violations. MLB Chief Communication Officer Pat Corney told Outsports, which bills itself as, quote, your home for all things LGBTQ plus sports, end quote. Sarcastically, Zero Hedge places in parentheses all things. Outsports said the players disgraced themselves and accused them of weaponizing the Pride Rainbow and attacking the LGBTQ community. In 2026, only the Texas Rangers are abstaining from Pride Night observations. The Giants' Pride Night featured the national anthem being performed by members of an LGBTQ-affirming non-denominational church. It's an oxymoron. That doesn't exist. It's like gay marriage. There is no such thing. And homosexual married couples renewing their vows under the approving eye of a drag queen. 3 Giants pitchers had their own idea for the festivities. So you notice that these people are living their way loudly. Mind you, in a nation that was founded by and for Christians, this is what we have descended to. So, what do three Giants players do? Starter Landon Rope and relievers JT Brubaker and Ryan Walker wrote Genesis 9:11 through 16 next to the rainbow SF, that's the logo of the San Francisco Giants on their cap, on the special hats issued for the occasion. Within those verses, God promises he'll never again unleash a mass homicide in the form of a flood as he did in the story of Noah, and he says the rainbow will serve as a recurring reminder of that commitment. And I'm just going to quote a portion here for the sake of redeeming the time. I have set my bow in the cloud, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and the earth. When I bring the clouds over the earth and the bow is seen in the clouds, I will remember my covenant that is between me and you and every living creature and all flesh. Obviously, this is to Noah. After the game, Roop told reporters he wanted to lead fans to God's covenant and the promise that he makes to us, adding, there is no hate at all. It's just what I stand for and what I stand in. I believe in God. As a believer, I would push LGBTQ people to read the Bible. Fourth Giant Sam Hentges, I think that's how you pronounce it, refused to wear the cap at all and said, it's just something that I feel like I was forced to support when I don't morally support it. I'm glad that Hentges took this posture because if you think about it, it's not only a humiliation ritual for Christians that they're trying to enforce, it's forced acceptance of something that is not a sincerely held belief. But that's part of what American culture has become, a series of insincere beliefs that you're supposed to regurgitate somehow, even though you don't actually believe them, to be considered part of polite society. So for all of the bluster about land of the free and home of the brave, we in fact have spiritual things at play here, which people allow to repress what their true feelings are on the matter. More on that shortly. San Francisco Chronicle sports columnist Ann Killen rallied against the pitchers for defacing their uniforms with a Bible verse. On a night that was supposed to be about inclusion, they hijacked the event for their own purposes. In the name of Christianity, they took a decidedly unchristian stance of exclusion and judgment. Let me say this. I commend what these players have done, where, in essence, they went contrarian here. But I also find it interesting that they decided to subtly point out that the rainbow doesn't belong to the LGBTQers, those whom are promoting it. In other words, they've hijacked it for the purposes of advancing sodomy, which, by the way, is a good enough messaging. I get it. But at the same time, in the same way that these homosexuals are willing to use euphemisms, apocalyptic euphemisms, to give the impression that these people are somehow hateful, which I find curious because for all of the inclusion that they say that they practice, you notice that they're very exclusionary of the people who believe differently than them. This is from a very people who preach absolute inclusion when in fact they are practicing absolute exclusion. But here's the thing. They mentioned Genesis 9:11, 16. This was a very subtle way for these three players to go against. It wasn't, as it were, as loud as, for example, and as straightforward as homosexuals shall not inherit the kingdom of God. 1 Corinthians 6:9. That would have been something. But notice that they softened the tonality here of the inherent messaging by saying, well, we necessarily oppose ourselves to the use of the rainbow and what they're trying to advance with it. My point here is to prove what I was saying earlier. So even now, Christians in a nation that was founded by Christians and for Christians, we are in a situation where now we are taught tippy-toe through the thing so that you don't find yourself in a heap of trouble. But curiously enough, they still found themselves in a heap of trouble because the people that are looking for trouble are always going to raise trouble. It doesn't matter what you try to do to appease them because they are muckrakers. This is exactly the thing that they do. So why try to appease these people? Why not come out and just in a straightforward fashion say what these people are practicing is sodomy, it is sin. God does not look kindly upon it. This will disallow you from the kingdom of heaven. And those that practice such things will not inherit the kingdom of heaven. They need to repent because they are living contrary to what God has commanded mankind, humankind, to live like. Straightforward, based on truth, absolute courage. This was more, as it were, of a softening of the language, although, again, I will commend them for stating this in a sense out loud, but it was a kind of sidestepping necessarily the main issue here. This is the sort of, shall we call it, middle way that modern Christianity has been teaching now to Christians for some time now. And unfortunately, many Christians have actually followed these steps where they tiptoe around the truth instead of speaking it boldly and courageously. I'll give you another example to prove the main point, the aforesaid. If you would visit with me, Matthew 18, there's a text here where this is standard practice, or it should be standard practice for Christians. Jesus here, under the subtitle, if you have an annotated Bible, they'll place confronting a brother who sins against you, or some similar title for that portion of the text of the narrative. Matthew 18:15. Now, if your brother sins against you, go correct him between you and him alone. If he listens to you, you have gained your brother. But if he does not listen, take with you in addition one or two others, so that by the testimony of two or three witnesses, every matter may be established. And if he refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church. But if he refuses to listen to the church, also let him be to you as a Gentile and a tax collector. So here we have Jesus once again, in another way, in another fashion, telling Christians, be courageous, be strong. Let's face it, it's an uncomfortable situation to approach someone and ask them that, or ask them to rectify a wrong, especially in our day and age where we've been taught that it's best to go behind the person's back. And this is something that is commonly practiced in churches, unfortunately, contrary to what we have the scriptural norms to be, as we've just read. Instead of confronting the person and being courageous about it and doing the manly thing, whether it's a woman or a man, by the way, doing the manly thing and stating, you've wronged me on this and you need correction on the matter, Christians have resorted to the secularist practice of jibber-jabbing behind the scenes, of back-talking, in a sense, of gossiping. That's not the way of a Christian. Gossiping is done by people whom have fear, whom succumb to their fear. Gossiping is done by people whom allow their fears to overtake them, that instead of taking that issue up with the person personally and resolving that matters, hopefully, like Jesus says, if he listens to you, you have gained your brother. Christians have resorted to a spirit of gossip, a spirit of malicious talking behind a person's back. That's not what the Bible calls us to do. The Bible condemns gossip as a sin, but since we don't live, as it were, we've allowed ourselves to make these things allowable in our midst, we suddenly don't find a problem with it. So some might say that my use of this example or these two examples is not necessarily accurate. I think it actually fits perfectly with what we're talking about here. So the question now before us is, considering this, being that someone might ask, Gio, I'm convicted by what you're talking about here. So what am I to do? How do I correct? How do I rectify this tendency that I have, where I've allowed, as it were, the spirit of the age to dictate the way that I should speak and act in these manners? Well, first and foremost, I think the first thing that you need to do is that you need to take the commandments, the advice, the exhortation that God gives to Joshua to heart. Be strong and courageous. It's kind of a curious thing. I forget. I know that it's been an oft-quoted quote, and I forget who it's attributed to now. It just escapes me at this moment. But it says, "The valiant man, he dies once, but the coward dies 1,000 deaths continually." And I know it's not exactly how it goes, but you get the point. So the purpose here for my using that quote in particular is because it's a vivid example of what the Bible, what Christian ethics is trying to teach us. Now, here's the thing. In order to rectify the spirit of cowardice and not succumb to it that has invaded, or the church has allowed to invade the church, you're going to have to understand first and foremost that you're going to run against the tide if you decide to follow in the Christly footsteps to being strong and courageous. Just read throughout the Gospels, and you'll notice that there were things that Jesus was doing continuously that ran him afoul, in a sense, or people themselves tried to run Jesus afoul for what he was doing. And Jesus was okay with that. You'll note, we read that text recently at the very beginning of John, where it says that he did not commend himself to men because he knows what is in man. That's the attitude that we have to have in this if we are to live righteously and faithfully as Christians whom stand strong on principle and whom stand strong in the truth. If you wish not to stand strong on truth, then guess what? Automatically, courage is out the wayside. It's not going to be there anymore because you need courage to live truthfully. You need courage in order to live it loudly, like Jesus tells us to live it. So first, ask the good Lord to give you the strength, and you're going to need to impose it, as it were. You're going to have to exercise the self-control to not care anymore about what people think, to not care about the opinions of men. You see, you can't succumb yourself. You can't be submitted to two masters. Jesus made that principle very clear. I know some will leave that only in the aspect of God and mammon, but the principle is very clear with other things. It's applicable in other ways as well. Either you serve God, and you please him and you're faithful to him, or you're faithful to men's opinions, which is based usually on things that are fiction, things that are false, whatever is submitted to fallen nature, et cetera, et cetera. So you have to decide. So that's the first step. Second step, once you have made that decision to not give a damn anymore, and I know some will take issue with that language. You can take issue with it. That's fine. Once you choose not to give a damn anymore, not to care anymore what people say of you, and trust me, you're going to have moments where that's going to come back as a temptation. But what if, or what if people say, you have to shut that thing down. And by shut that thing down is you just move forward by being courageous. And the way that you're by speaking the truth and living it. You're always going to have that voice, as it were, in your head that tells you, but what if, what happens if? That's always going to be there. The way you fight against that and the way you kill that thing, in a sense, is by continuously being courageous, is by continually demonstrating courage, and by living truthfully and living it loudly. And I guarantee you it gets to a point where, frankly, you don't care anymore. That's no longer a factor. It's no longer an issue in your mind. It doesn't come up anymore because now you have become acclimated, as it were. You've become used to the idea of just living that way, and that people are going to criticize you, and that people are going to badmouth you, and that there are those whom are going to vilify you. Jesus himself says, blessed are those when they speak ill words of you. It's part of it. Jesus tries to prepare us for living in a Christian way in the world, what we would face. But we still have to be courageous, and we still have to be strong. So that's the second point. The third point, don't be afraid for people to call you disagreeable. So you're disagreeable. You're not being disagreeable just to disagree. That's one thing. Understand that being disagreeable for the sake of being disagreeable, that's not what the Christian is called to do. The Christian is called to disagree when what the person is doing, what the person is saying, deviates from Christian principles. Then you present your objections. It's that simple. I mean, if a person were to approach me, say, why are you so disagreeable? I would say, I'm not disagreeable for the sake of being disagreeable. I disagree with you when I find that what you're saying, what you're living, et cetera, is disagreeable. If you don't like it, that's one thing. But don't say that I make it a habit of being disagreeable just for the sake of it. I mean, you're bringing a person to conviction when you say something like that. This person, now, granted, there are those whom will reject that, sensing the truth of what you're saying because they just don't wish to acknowledge it. But that's on them. That's not on you. Don't let churches, as it were, that repeat this other nonsense we're talking about, impress upon you that you're somehow at fault for a sinner getting offended with the truth. That's not your fault. That's their fault for rejecting the truth. That's not on you. That's a third point. Fourth point in all of this. When you, and I think this part more than anything else serves as a fresh reminder of why it's important, or shall I say that for the sake of it. It's one of the perfect things. It's a reward that you get for being courageous and for being strong. One of the things that is a byproduct, a reward, as it were, an inherent reward of living truthfully, of not caring what others have to say about you because you understand that you're living, you're standing on the truth, is that first you get the satisfaction that, and it's a deep, long-lasting fulfillment and satisfaction that you are being faithful to Christ. And that is a feeling, and I hate to describe it as that, but it operates in a sense like that. That is a feeling that is indescribable. But on the other side of that, it's something that is necessarily infectious. And by infectious, I mean it'll begin to rub off on people whom surround you. Your wife, your husband, your children, your friends. Others will see the courage that you're living according to the courage of your convictions, and they will also begin to follow suit. Might not be today, it might be in due time, but others will begin to see that and say, I want that, because they eventually get sick and tired of the coward's way. And they start following, as it were, in the footsteps of they start following the example of a person who is showing how to be strong and how to be courageous. There is one final exhortation I have for the audience here. Do not be surprised if some of your loudest critics are going to be people whom self-avow as Christians. Sometimes the loudest protestations that I have heard against Christian living hasn't come from sinners, although they do. I don't want to mislead you. It does. It's naturally going to happen where sinners are going to loudly declaim against a Christian being a Christian. That's just the way it is. That's par for the course. That's to be expected. But what a lot of Christians get taken aback with is when other Christians more loudly denounce the Christian who is living truthfully and courageously than sinners. Because the first question that comes to mind then is that, I think justifiably so, why, if this person is my brother, my sister in Christ, why don't they see that what I'm doing is trying to follow in Jesus' footsteps? Why are they criticizing me for this? Why are they bad-mouthing me for this? Why are they giving false testimony on me for this? There you've got a situation where now Matthew 18 comes into play. Go through the process. But you also have to understand that you're dealing with, and especially in the historical context in which we're living in nowadays, you've got Christians whom have been so brainwashed by what I was profiling earlier at the beginning of this live stream, by this thought process of the religion of niceness, that it overrides, or it seeks to override Christian living, that is the ultimate religion that they live by. They don't understand that it's not Christ-like living that drives them. It's a false, or it's a cheap imitation of that. It's a false representation of what it means to be a loving Christian, as it were, which is to, in essence, stand down and don't speak the truth. That's the essence of it. Don't be surprised by that. But in due time there, you also have to do what Paul, writing one of the pastoral epistles, says, rebuke them sharply, so that they may be right in the faith. If you ever find yourself in a situation where you have Christians bad-mouthing you for speaking the truth, then you are in your right there, divine right given to you by God, as it were, as we've just read in Matthew 18, to correct those people. Don't be brought to shame by those persons. Continue doing what you're doing, because ultimately what you're living for is the approbation of God and not of man. But that's another pressure point that you have to be careful with, lest you begin to fall into that trap once again by those whom are currently in the trap. So my final send-off for you this evening, again, be strong, be courageous. Strength and courage are in short supply nowadays. But it's not because it's out there it's in limited supply. It's because Christians in particular aren't reaching for it. They're not exercising their God-given self-control to implement these things. These are virtues that are there to be taken hold of and to be used. So use them. And see the benefits that are reaped, the spiritual benefits that are reaped, and also the rewards, the eternal rewards that God gives you, and the rewards in the here and now for representing Christ in a bold and in a strong and courageous manner. I hope this helps you. That's all I have for you on this edition of the live stream. If you've watched all the way through, thank you for doing so. A couple of reminders before I sign off. Do not forget to subscribe, to hit the notification bell, to click the thumbs up, and to share our content. Also, I remind the audience that our next live stream will be on Sunday at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. That'll be our next live stream edition. For those of you that commented, place your questions. Well, from what I see here, it seems like it's just comments. Thank you for those of you that left your comments in the in this content for your QR code in the upper left-hand corner of the screen. There's also a link available to you in the description box below, and follow us on the socials. On X, Irrespective77 is the username, and the Irrespective is the username on TikTok. TikTok. Second time I said that. TikTok. The Irrespective is the username. That's all the time I have left for this edition. Thank you for joining me. Until the next occasion that we gather. God